Welcome back to Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from the Indianapolis Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
We are both back from another toasty morning at the Bimal Practice Complex watching football practice. Purdue makes every football practice, I shouldn't say every, they have not made the Saturday scrimmages open to the media, but every other practice so far has been open to the media. There are not that many programs, not just in the Big Ten, but through across Power Four, really into all of Division I football that do that. And I appreciate that we're getting that perspective on a day-to-day basis. We're about halfway through camp, and obviously the biggest question is still who's going to start on opening day for this football team. And I was not around for three of last week's practices. I had a ill-timed vacation. But Sam, you have been there for every practice. I'm just curious, as we approach the middle of this season, the title that you all saw is about basketball, and we are going to mostly talk basketball today. But I feel like we have to sort of just touch base on this topic. Sam, where do you feel, in your estimation, the quarterback battle is as we are basically at the halfway point of preseason camp?
We were in sync and both thinking that Ryan Brown would be the starter for this team. But, I will say this. They've given four quarterbacks equal reps and equal opportunities almost. Don't know if it's exactly equal, but pretty close. With, the first unit, Barry Odom has said they don't have a first team or a second team or whatever, but the first offensive unit that goes out there, different guys have worked with that group: Bennett Meredith, Evans Chuba, Malachi Singleton, and Ryan Brown. BTN was able to watch the scrimmage on Saturday, the only ones who got to see it, aside from the people who are a part of the program. And I saw Dave Revson tweeted out that it's a two-man race between Malachi Singleton and Ryan Brown. I don't know if that's information that he got from somebody there, or if that was his perspective of just having watched, but that's probably what we would both guess is those two. And I think Ryan Brown probably just seems like the guy who's getting more and more of the opportunities when they're trying to distinguish, because, I assume the coaching staff has an idea internally who they're going to start. They're just not telling us, and they're still going to give these guys opportunities. But I think Ryan Brown is probably the guy, at least, who will start the season at quarterback. And that doesn't mean he's going to play the entire first game or second game, because if those games get out of hand, you would like to see what the other guys can do in a game-like setting. But that would be my guess right now.
If I don't know what format they used on Saturday, if there was a thing where they sort of split into teams and those were the two quarterbacks, that would be the same thing. Even if I wasn't told that, it would be my assumption after that was the guys at the top. And you're right. They have rotated very consistently through everything. I mean, there'll be one day where, and I don't care what the coaches say, there clearly is a first unit on offense. Like, it's the same offensive linemen out there as a group. The ones that you expect would be competing, like the starters, are there every time. Like, they don't want to say that because they don't want to get into a thing where players are like, what do you mean I'm not on the first team? So they aren't calling it that, but we can't lie to you and tell you that that isn't what the first team offensive line is and who's working with the ones then. So, but all of them have. I mean, there was a day where it was Ryan Brown, and the next day it was Evans Chuba that was with the first offense going. And they have really gone through a lot. And part of that is because, taking them at the word, they're trying to develop depth. I do think there's a part of it too, though, that they have not seen real separation. Even though I did this week, in a couple of capacities, a couple of drills, start to see where I think there is a separation between Ryan Brown and the others. That has not been there consistently. You and I were talking before we recorded today about a drill that basically collapsed. They couldn't even run it because the quarterback play was kind of erratic today. And that's not what you want to be talking about in the middle of August. But when I look at the upside that Ryan Brown potentially possesses, and considering the fact that of the four guys, he's the one who has also had to make up the most ground and even just learning the offense and becoming familiar with a new team again. At least the other three were here in the spring, got to know Josh Henson, got to learn the offense, were inside the playbook, played with at least some of these receivers and backs. He's had the longest to go. But just from context clue standpoint, I don't know that Purdue would have brought him in just for the sake of depth.
Right.
I think the point all along was this guy probably is an upgrade or is more immediately ready to win, or at least is going to push somebody else to prove that they're better. And I haven't seen that yet in camp. That's not to say it can't still happen, but I also think, and we're going to talk to Barry Odom. We're recording this on Tuesday. We're not going to talk to Barry Odom again until Thursday. We have not had a chance to talk to him since this scrimmage, and they have another scrimmage coming up this Saturday. But they've got to be getting close to a point where they go with one guy and start getting that offense, that unit ready for the season opener.
Yeah, that's the best bet, to hit the ground running in game play. And that's typically how it works. And you'd like to name a starting quarterback sooner rather than later. Ryan Brown, to me, seems like the guy who has he's the best at having the internal clock of knowing I've got a finite amount of time before this pocket collapses, and I've either got to throw the ball away or take off. And I think that's, if you're looking for a separation, that's where he's maybe ahead of the other guys. Malachi Singleton is great on his legs and can make plays in the open field, but I've seen a lot of guys just they're calling them sacks. They're basically time sacks because they know in a game-like setting you're not going to have 8 seconds to roam around and find an open receiver. So they just blow the whistle and say, hey, you got sacked, because they're not going to go level the quarterback during the practice. But to me, when I watch this, Ryan Brown will see, it's 1, it's 2, it's 3, and then he's rolling out or taking off or throwing the ball away more consistently than the others, kind of knowing when to just live to see another down.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't think he's doing it to like he's a 9 and everybody else is a 5 or anything. Like there's, he still has some stuff he has to clean up too. But there was one drill in particular I was watching at Monday's practice, and they were cycling through all 4 guys. And I guess we should mention, who haven't we mentioned in that group? Bennett Meredith being the other one.
Oh, yeah.
The other guy. I mentioned Chuba, and so but Bennett Meredith being the 4th one. And then they've got, Garrett Odom too. They've got 5 scholarship quarterbacks, at least believe them all to be on scholarship. They were cycling through this with the various teams, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, what we would perceive to be that. And so everybody was getting reps with the ones, everybody was getting reps with others. And they each quarterback got 4 plays, basically. And there was a stretch of that where what I was writing down, I had Ryan Brown 9 of 11, and the 2 incompletions were both drops. And now some of those were like dump offs and little screen things out of the backfield. Those weren't all cannon shots downfield. But I was also seeing him be the one who seemed to trust both his reads and his arm more downfield. And if you're combining that with a bigger body that can run as well or better than the other guys, that's where all of those little pieces of evidence start to turn me towards him. But I don't think it's a guarantee yet. I think that's just my read on where it's trending. That's not what the coaches have told me. That's just from getting to watch practice every day. That's what I've been taking away from it. I'm very curious when we talk to Barry Odom on Thursday if he says anything regarding the quarterback plan and where it sits right now, or if maybe probably more likely than that, Saturday is sort of a proving ground. The Saturday is kind of like a final pressure test, and they will have to come out of Saturday's internal scrimmage, and have some sort of decision made on how to shrink those reps, or I guess grow the reps in favor of, if not the number 1, then at least your number 1 and number 2. That maybe somebody like whoever they deem to be 3rd and 4th right now maybe has to peel off a little bit and not get as many reps with the ones, because you've got to start fortifying your offense around the one guy. Yeah,
and you mentioned the size. I don't know if people realize how big of a dude Ryan Brown is. He's every bit of 6'4". He's a pretty well put together guy. And maybe you don't realize that when you're watching a game on TV or, whatever. But when you stand next to him, he's got a towering presence about him that, Malachi Singleton is not a short guy, but he's not the same size of caliber. Evans Chuba is a tall guy, but Ryan Brown being that size, being able to throw the ball with velocity downfield, being able to move with his legs, I think kind of has more of the total package. And then you're talking about in-game experience. Not that there's a lot with him, but he's got more than the rest.
Yeah. Malachi Singleton's not short by sports writer standards. I would argue he may be short by the power conference quarterback standards. But there's ways you can make up for that. And I think he's a talented guy. And if he had to be on the field for Purdue this season, I think there are things he could do. But just that's our read as we are, again, pretty much at the halfway point of preseason camp. Like I said, one more scrimmage coming up on Saturday, like an inter-squad scrimmage. Maybe there's one even at the end of the preseason. I don't know. But I know that Saturdays they are holding a scrimmage that we're not allowed, or a practice that we're not allowed to see, which traditionally means scrimmage. And they're going to probably be making some pretty important determinations out of that. I will be curious to see how different practice looks for us Monday when we're back out for another open practice compared to what it looks like even Friday. I think Saturday could be a differentiator. I'll be interested to see that. Yeah. So let's talk basketball. You were just at a basketball practice that I also missed while I was up beach bumming in Michigan. Did not get to see Omer Mayer practice, and had sort of, I guess, some limited interview opportunities afterwards, but that included Oscar Cleft, that included Matt Painter. Before we get into this sort of like fun exercise that I thought we'd go into, I just want to get your takeaways from that practice, from that conversation also, like what you saw about how this team is playing together with one important person out of the mix, and but also just how they're talking about where they are right now.
Yeah, so this would be the first time that I've seen them, and I think any of us who cover the team have seen since early in the summer. And it's just one of the things that I noted and was talking to some other people about was it's like Antoine West is really good. Jack Benter is really good. And these are like your 8th, 9th, 10th guys on your team. And I mean, it's incredible the depth that this team has. But you know, you also have to keep egos in check and stuff too. And I don't think that that's going to be an issue with this team. It typically hasn't been in recent years with Matt Painter teams that have been uber talented. The one thing that I think is noticeably different than last year's team is what Purdue can do with having Daniel Jacobson back and having Oscar Clough. Those are two guys that aren't afraid to go out on the perimeter and shoot. They're able to go inside and kind of impose their will. Daniel Jacobson with his just length and size, and then Oscar Clough is a big, bulky guy that can throw his weight around and get where he wants to go, and is just a rebounding savant. It kind of seems like an area that Purdue desperately could have used last year. But because of that, you can put Trey Coffman-Wren back at the 4, even though he had said last year he wants to play the 5. He likes to play the 5 because he was getting 20 shots a game. But because of that, he's able to get middle of the paint where he's most effective, and then he's got the option to kind of lob over the top. They did that multiple times during this practice where he would lob over the top for an easy dunk for Jacobson or Clough, because you have to respect what he can do as a scorer. So that's an added wrinkle. And then Braden Smith is, I mean, he was phenomenal last year. He was phenomenal 2 years ago, and he is just kind of added to his game a little bit, and he looks like he's the mastermind of the whole thing out there, taking control, getting on guys. So, just from the couple hours that we were there, on the backs of having seen the alumni game and reunion and all that stuff on the Saturday before, a lot of positives to take away from just a summer practice that, could seem like a throwaway.
Yeah, that interaction between Trey Coffman-Wren, like sort of that triangle that now will exist between not just Braden Smith and Trey Coffman last year, and the pick and roll and everything they could do together, the short roll, all that stuff. But now adding in that third element, another big man playing alongside Trey Coffman-Wren, and that sort of three-way functionality, I think is just this team was really strong offensively last year. Offense wasn't what ultimately was their undoing, and maybe didn't allow them to reach the full capacity of what they had strived for, although I think it was still a very successful season. But it's not just that it's going to help take care of the rebounding. It's not just that it's going to help with rim protection. It's that you're adding another facet to an already really tough to defend offense that I think is going to be really interesting. So I'm looking forward to when I'll finally get to see them practice again, hopefully sometime soon. But I wanted to take us in a little bit of a different direction. This is really more of like a summer topic, but I think it's going to help us have a conversation about the 2025-26 Purdue basketball team. So I was inspired by Raphael Davis recently. You all know Raphael, former Purdue basketball player, now Big Ten personality, had retweeted, reposted, whatever, one of these things that you see every once in a while. It's you spend 15 points to make the best team of some group of guys. And sometimes it's like players from just throughout NBA history, or it's players from one certain college. And this one was even more specific. It happened to be the all-time Matt Painter group of players. So here were the players that you got to pick from before we start this. And what we're going to do is we will have sort of a combination draft auction. I guess it's more of a draft. You have to stay within the 15 points or dollars or whatever terminology you want to use. I guess we'll use points. It's a family show. And you have to pick 5 players spending no more than 15 points. You don't have to spend exactly 15, but you can't spend more than 15. And I'd say that the other thing we'll put on this is you have to actually build something that looks like a basketball team. You can't just pick 5 big men. That would be stupid. Like we're trying to come up with what would actually be a team that you could then put on the floor as a starting 5 and really go win a lot of games. So here's how they broke down. The $5 players: Braden Smith, Carson Edwards, Robbie Hummel, Caleb Swanigan, Zach Edey. That group I actually didn't have a problem with. I think you could probably defend all those as being $5 players. As you get to 4, 3, 2, and 1, you're going to have guys that you probably would move up and down one level, or this is all just personal preference, but we're going to go by what they did just to have a basis for this debate. And basically just to save time from us coming up with our own. The $4 players: Jaden Ivey, Etwan Moore, Dakota Mathias, Trey Coffin-Wren, Jawan Johnson. $3 players: Chris Kramer, Fletcher Lawyer, Vincent Edwards, Carl Landry, AJ Hammonds. $2 players: Lewis Jackson, Lance Jones, Rafael Davis, Trevion Williams, and Isaac Haas. $1 players: PJ Thompson, Teron Johnson, Ryan Klein, Mason Gillis, and Matt Harms. So, Sam, since you have to change more diapers still than I do these days, I wanted to give you the choice. Do you want pick number 1, or do you want to have the 2-3 swing? And as we snake our way through this,
doing a snake draft with 2 people.
Well, I don't know another way to do it, because I feel like you're giving whoever has the number 1 pick. Maybe how about we do this? The first 2 rounds are a snake, and then we just go back and forth. Does that make sense?
Sure.
All right.
I mean, I would have to take Zach Edey. He's the most dominant player in the last quarter century of college basketball. You get the luxury of seeing that guy every day for 2 years, and then he's gone. You realize how spoiled you were getting to cover a guy, not just the basketball player, but he was very personable, great with the media, which sometimes you come to appreciate when guys are willing to give you their time more than others. But the fact that he related to the crowd in a way that I've never seen is just incredible. I don't know if any Purdue fan has a negative thing to say about him, because he not only did he go out there and win a lot of games for your team by dominating games from defense, rebounding, point scoring, getting to the free throw line and fouling out players on the other team. Then he goes out and takes pictures with kids for 2 hours after the game. Just a complete program guy that I think that you have to, if you're starting a team with the guys on this list, that has to be your top choice.
And you were saying you saw that even last Saturday at the alumni game, right?
Like that stood up during the first half of the alumni game, and nobody in the stands cared what was going on in the alumni game anymore. They all matriculated down to the corner of Mackey Arena in the bottom, getting basketballs and hats and T-shirts and jerseys and everything else signed. And true to what he did at Purdue, he stayed there and signed all of them.
You know, I had a good time generally in life and professionally during my 5 years in Columbus. The one thing that I regret is that I perfectly missed the entirety of the Zach Edey experience. I missed the year that he was being recruited and pursued and signed. And then I missed all 4 years watching him turn into what he became. I mean, I saw it from afar. I watched some Purdue basketball. I didn't watch it religiously, though, not knowing I would be back in this position someday. And but obviously what you saw was incredibly special. And I think had I been picking number 1, if you had chosen to do the snake instead, I would have taken him number 1. I think there's almost no other choice, because I think you could argue, with maybe the exception of Rick Mount, there's nobody who has more changed the game around them than Zach Edey did. And you could even argue it's a step beyond, just because Mount played before the 3-point shot. So some of the things he did had that ceiling on them as far as like how it was actually affecting the game. Whereas with Edey, not that he was a 3-point shooter, but just the way the game is constructed now, being what he was, I think there's just no other choice for number one.
Yeah, the biggest thing to me during his last 2 years at Purdue especially was just the junk defenses that teams would throw and the amount of guys they would run out there, and they would put guys in the game to go out there and specifically just, listen, we're not going to stop them. You're 5 fouls. You're on the end of our bench. Go out there and just use the ball, just foul them, because you're going to give up 2 points otherwise. And if you're not practicing this stuff the entire season, and then all of a sudden we're playing Purdue, so we've got to add this different wrinkle, and we've got to put it in and install it in 2 days because they have this dominant force, then Purdue's already won in a lot of ways, because you're forcing teams to have to think outside the box just to have a chance against you.
So it's my pick. I'm going to take 2 and 3, and then we'll just start going back and forth just to even things out a little bit here at the top. And I've been thinking about this, like, so what do you take here? Do you go with another big man? Do you go with sort of an all-around player, or do you go with someone who maybe has that and a little bit of an X factor, especially relative to their position? So I guess this is not really this could be pick 2 or 3 because I get them both, but just for the sake of posterity, I'm going to take Braden Smith here as my $5 player and the second player. And we'll talk about him before I make pick 3, but to me, I don't know who you're arguing is a better point guard in Purdue history. He's certainly the best point guard of the Matt Painter era, and you can then build something around what he is. Not to the same extent that you can with Edey, I don't think, which is, again, what kind of makes this a germane topic for this point in Purdue history. But I still think that he is singular in some ways, and whereas a lot of other guys on this list kind of coexist with some other people who are very similar, he just sort of stood out to me as somebody that needed to be taken off the board early, especially if you don't get Zach Edey.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Here's a story that I was told a couple of years ago when Braden Smith was a sophomore. Bruce Parkinson, who owned Purdue's all-time assist record, and Brian Walker, who I think was number 2 at the time, 2 of Purdue's all-time great point guards, and they're watching Braden Smith, and I think it was Bruce Parkinson who said to Brian Walker, I think somebody's going to break our assist records. And sure enough, he did it before he even ended his junior year, and now he's coming back as a senior, and he's going to, set this. These numbers are going to be so astronomical they'll never get past when he leaves here. So, and if that was all he did, that's great. But he gets a lot of steals. He scores a lot of points. He's going to have probably 2,000 points before he leaves Purdue, and he changes the game in a different way than Zach Edey changed the game. But because you have to tier your whole defense around not letting him get downhill, because when he gets the ball going towards the basket, you're kind of at his mercy. And then now he's added this ability to do this little step back jumper that seems almost unblockable, which is unfathomable for a guy who's maybe 5'11". He's a dynamic player. There's a reason he was the Big Ten Player of the Year. There's a lot of Big Ten Players of the Year on this list, which is pretty telling to how successful Matt Painter has been at recruiting. But yeah, I think that's an obvious number 2 choice.
Yeah, and Matt Painter has many times in many interviews I've heard him talk about we don't get McDonald's All-Americans. We don't get that level of player, right? But if you want to be able to say that and then also still be one of the 10 best programs in the country, which I think they are right now, you have to crush these sorts of picks, these sorts of guys. You have to find guys at that almost ignored level to some extent definitely under recruited level, who are not just really good, but are like sensational. And you got one in Edie and followed it right up with, or some overlap with Braden Smith. And I think that's going to just sort of define this era of Purdue basketball.
One of the best Matt Painter quotes that I've ever heard, and I think it was after Purdue played Davidson in Indianapolis a couple of years ago, and somebody in the post game, because they have this press conference setting where the Pacers typically would do it, and they just kind of asked Matt Painter, "How are you doing this? Like, you're very successful, and you're not getting 5-star recruits. You're getting these undervalued guys." And his response was, "Well, they're 5 stars to me, or they're 5 stars in my eyes, and my evaluation is the only thing that matters. I don't care what some recruiting service ranks them. If I get, same thing with CJ Cox, we talked about quite a bit last year. If I go out and see you play and I think, this is a 5-star guy for what Purdue basketball is, I'll take you."
Yeah. And I think there's no other way to look at it. That's how you have to look at it. So now I've got to make another pick before you and I start flipping back and forth. And I'm of a couple of minds here, but I think I'm going to go with my gut and say I want to make sure that I wrap up what I think might be the best value on the board, or one of the best values, especially if for what I'm trying to build, if you want to make sure, like, you've already got a point guard, I want to make sure that I can pair that with a shooting guard who can really stretch defenses, because I think there's enough post depth here that I can come back and get really quality guys in later rounds. And I'm going to take Ryan Klein for $1 here, because I think just getting that 40% 3-point shooting at a really high volume out of the way gives me some flexibility with what I want to do in later rounds.
I assume you're going to take the Tennessee version of the NCAA tournament Sweet 16, Ryan Klein, that made the most improbable shots time and time again. That, look, coupled with Carson Edwards doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, came through in a big way at a big moment. I don't think anybody can deny that. So that's what I'm going to bank on there, and hopefully you can. There was another player that I considered there for the same reason. We'll see who you decide to go with, and see if he comes off the board at some point.
I'm going to spend all my money early, I think, here, but I'm thinking defensively first, and for that reason, I'm going to take Juwan Johnson and put him at the 4, even though he played at 5, I think, while he was at Purdue. And then you're going to have, 2 Big Ten defensive players of the year and 2 Big Ten players of the year in the post. And I don't know if anybody's going to score or get a rebound around the rim if you have Zach Edey packaged with Juwan Johnson.
I almost go ahead.
I'm just like, people forget this is a lottery pick and another first round draft pick. Juwan Johnson was after he left Purdue.
I almost took him there, and I decided I went that other direction. And actually, your pick that's probably who I might have taken next. And your decision kind of flummoxes my my strategy there, but I think it's fair to do that. I mean, obviously, he was more of a 5 than a 4, but I think he was versatile enough that you could probably get away with this. I am curious if this is something that Matt Painter would do, because while we're talking about playing, Traycon and Wren next to Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson, that's very different than playing Zach Edey next to another big man. And this is going to be great in terms of rim protection and rebounding and that certain kind of defense. It's maybe not going to be great in terms of some other defensive matchups, getting up and down the floor, that sort of thing. So I'm curious what you'll do in later rounds to try to equalize that a little bit. But obviously a great player. And in some ways, just because they have pumped so many great big men through this program, almost a little bit overlooked or forgotten already. And maybe true Purdue fans would probably.
Well, he came back for the alumni game, which I think is the first time he's been a part of it since he left. So that was a lot of people kind of being like, I posted some videos online and Robbie Hummel went bananas there, but it was a lot of people being like, was that Juwan Johnson in the background? And those two actually did the jump ball, which gave fans kind of a thrill, taking them back to like 2009. And it was kind of funny. And then Hummel won the jump ball because Juwan Johnson, who's still playing pro basketball, didn't really make an effort. But he did some things that were just kind of nostalgic for the Purdue fans in attendance, with his ability to hit baseline jumpers and things of that sort. Threw down a couple dunks, also missed a dunk, which he was able to laugh off. I guess he can do an alumni game, but he looks like he's versatile enough for me that, he can play away from the basket a little bit and give Edey the space to work underneath.
Well, now that you have gone big man, I think that gives me the freedom to not take a big man here and try to find another person that I think
I was going to take Matt Harms next.
Is of great value. Like I said, let's try to put together an actual basketball team here. Let's not completely throw caution to the wind. And I am going to stay in the backcourt, and I'm going to stay in the NBA draft lottery. I'm going to take Jaden Ivey for $4 because I'm very curious. Now, in reality, I don't know if this works. Do you put a playmaking guard like Ivy and a playmaking guard like Braden Smith on the court together, and they coexist and share the ball and are also getting the ball in the post as much as they need to? I don't know, but I'd sure like to find out. So in this imaginary multiverse that where this team could exist, that's what we're going to find out if that's going to happen. So I've spent now 10 of my $15. I have Braden Smith, Jaden Ivey, and Ryan Klein. You saw more of Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey was one that I covered just as a recruit, and then I left the summer before his 2 seasons. And a brief time here relative to some of the other guys that are great players in Purdue history. But I thought an important player in Purdue history that maybe Matt Painter can go to other guards around the country and say, no, like Jaden Ivey came here, had 2 years, did all these things, went on to the NBA. Unfortunately, in the NBA, things have, the injury they had last year really interrupted his trajectory, but still potentially could go on to a very productive and interesting NBA career. Could end up being, I think, a really important player as you look at this next stage of Matt Painter's basketball legacy.
Yeah, when Jaden Ivey was a sophomore, and it's the first guy during the Matt Painter era, which is 2006 maybe was first year. I can't remember. I said that guy will be an NBA All-Star, was just kind of how I thought. He's so athletic. Obviously comes from a basketball family. Everybody knows his mom. And he hit big shots. He had a big shot to beat Ohio State his freshman year, I believe, and then did it again the next year. And then was the 4th overall pick in the draft, I think, maybe 5th overall pick in the draft. So the Pistons thought highly enough of him to take him. And then he was a dynamic scorer for a year and a half before he had that catastrophic injury last year. That's a great pick to partner with Braden Smith, I think, because this is a guy that can get out and run. And Braden Smith is not shy about lobbing the ball to the basket for Cam Heide or Miles Colvin, in the past years. I think he can do a lot of things with a guy that can pass the ball the way Braden Smith does, and Jaden Ivey being as athletic and fast as he is.
You're up. You have spent $9 on 2 players. You have about 16 feet worth of basketball player. You probably need to find some guys who can dribble a little bit.
Yeah, it's disappointing because when I looked at this list, I was like, man, Carl Landry was a guy that was the very first Matt Painter team, and he was phenomenal. Played in the NBA for a long time, and I think he was almost the first-round pick. He might have been the first pick in the second round coming out of Purdue, and I was like, man, I'm going to find a way to get him. But now I don't think there's any way I can add Carl Landry to this.
We'll see what you do with your other picks. Maybe you could come back to him.
You've got a point guard, so I'm going to steer away from that for this pick anyway. And man, I'm going to stay with defense, and I'm going to go with Rafael Davis at the 3. And he's a guy who, Chris Kramer would be a great pick too. But I think I've got to save some money here and go with the $2 pick of Rafael Davis. Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, was a guy who was capable of scoring, didn't score a whole bunch, but was definitely a capable scorer. And because of the potential, defensive liabilities, maybe of having 2 bigs, I think you've got to get a guy that can lock down some longer guys on the perimeter, or, if you want to put him on a point guard or whatever it is.
Yeah, Rafael was one of my favorite stories from my first tenure here covering those teams. I came onto the beat in 2013-14, which people might remember was about the low point of the Matt Painter tenure, right? Like they had missed the tournament the year before, but I think they were 8-12 in the Big Ten. They weren't good enough, but they weren't bad. And that 2013-14 team was bad, and it got really bad towards the end. Jay Simpson had his medical issue. Sterling Carter, transfer that had like provided some veteran help, gets hurt again. And they lost their last 7 games, including losing at home to Northwestern. Back when losing to Northwestern meant bad things, losing to them at home on senior day, and then bowing out first round of the Big Ten tournament. And during that season, though, well, 2 important things were happening behind all of that. Number one was they were bringing in the next recruiting class that was Dakota Mathias, PJ Thompson, Vince Edwards, Isaac Haas. Like that changed things in an important way. But they also, middle of that season, they were having a leadership issue, and they made a sophomore named Raphael Davis a captain on that team. And Raphael was a guy who certainly, I think, maximized his talents in some important ways, especially defensively. He came here not as an exceptional defensive player and left as an exceptional defensive player. When everybody, I think, was expecting A.J. Hammonds to win Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year one year, it was Raphael Davis that got that award. And deserved it. Like he locked up a lot of guys that year and was an important transitional piece. He unfortunately did not get to then go and experience NCAA tournament success. They only, they got back in the tournament the next couple of years, but couldn't quite get over the top until he had moved on. But he was an important cog in that, in getting them back to the place where, he taught, I think, those young guys how to lead in the right way, however you want to define that. And you saw some evidence of that still on the court the next couple of years. I have $5 left to spend, which means I could go as high as 4 with this next pick. And I'm tempted, but man, this is a tough choice. I wish I could spend 5. Actually, there's still some really good value at $5, but I guess so. Now the choice for me, I guess, comes down to: do I take Trey Kaufman for $4, which locks me into taking a player for $1, which would probably be Matt Harms? Because if I'm trying to build, a spot here, I guess I could go with someone who's more of a 4. Maybe I could get away with Mason Gillis as a $1 player, but I kind of want to go with maybe a little bit more of a sure thing down low. I'm going to take someone that I think is maybe a little bit, I don't know if he's undervalued here, but is maybe more appreciated by Purdue fans than is appreciated in general. And that's Trevion Williams for $2. And I guess I didn't really have to be frugal here because I think you're done taking big men. But Trevion was not a conventional Purdue big man, right? Like he's not a 7-foot monster down there, but was so versatile down there that I think I could probably pair him with any of the centers that are left here. And he gives you enough out of the 4 from a little bit of shooting help, very good passer. I just like what he can be from a matchup standpoint.
Yeah. You're right. Because he didn't go to the NBA, I think briefly was with the Celtics Summer League team or something like that, and has done exceptional overseas. I think over time, if you don't follow Purdue religiously, like he's a guy that there's so many great players that go through the Big Ten or through college basketball that he's a guy that gets lost. But the fact that Purdue had him and Zach Edey at the same time allowed Matt Painter to do a lot of different things. And it was actually during Edey's first year as the National Player of the Year, he told me extensively how valuable it was for him to get to learn under a guy like that, which made him the most important thing that he learned from that was being a passing big man, because once he became dominant, he started seeing weak side help, or he would turn where there typically wouldn't be a defender, and all of a sudden there's people there, and he had to learn how to pass out of that. And he became a really consistent, really good passer, getting the ball back out to guys like Fletcher Lawyer, getting it back out to the top of the key and resetting. And I don't know if he gets that development if he doesn't have the years playing with Trevion Williams.
You are up. You have $4 left.
I've used 5, 4, and 2.
$4 left for 2 spots, and you still don't have a point guard, and you still don't have. Well, you're probably going to take 2 guards here. Let's face it.
Yeah, I mean, depends how you want to use Rafael Davis. I put him at
call
the
him like a 3. I call him like a 3 on offense, most likely, and then but can lock up a lot of 2s and maybe in some point guards on defense.
I think I need scoring. And for that reason, man, I feel like we're leaving some of the all-time best players in Purdue history.
Yeah, you have to. You have to.
But I need scoring, so I'm going to go Vince Edwards. He's a guy who was really, really good. Another guy that probably, if you don't just follow Purdue as a fan, you probably forget about over time. But he did a lot of great things and was able to light up the scoreboard for, kind of that resurgence of Purdue basketball that you were just alluding to earlier. And I think that he gives you something, kind of as a 2 guard maybe. He and Raphael, I guess, can be versatile in being 2 and 3 and whatever you need. That will leave me with needing a point guard. So you can probably decide who one of my last 2, or I guess out of maybe 2 possible choices, who my last guy will be. But I think that gives you something that's an added element compared to what the rest of my roster is so far.
Yeah. By the way, the whole point of this exercise is you have to leave off some of the greatest players because they tier it by value, and you're limiting the value. So
we're going to be crucified because nobody took Robbie Hummel. So
right. Which, if you were doing this with 5 people, that's the best way to do this, right? Do it with 5 people, so everybody ends up spending all their money, but everybody ends up taking all the 5 best players probably at the end of the day, or the 10 best players or whatever. But when it's just the 2 of us, we have to make tough decisions. Vincent Edwards, another guy that I think ultimately, again, I was around for his tenure, and someone who came in, I think, with like such high expectations that because he never became like a lottery, even first round, like surefire NBA talent, I think people feel like there was something kind of unfulfilled with his career, or there's at least some segment of the fan base that like felt that way at the time. And I think that he is a pretty underrated player. I mean, he was a very good rebounder, a very good scorer. I remember him being like a really good offensive rebounder. Maybe I'm wrong about that, as I'm recollecting from those years ago. But like just a talented player, and a guy who could also go out and have big scoring nights, and just really versatile. And I think now he would probably be the guy that fits in more as your 3. I mean, you've got quite a rebounding team here between Zach Edey, Vincent Edwards, and Juwan Johnson. I think you should have like a plus 30 rebounding edge every night. Plus, with Raphael being as good as he is defensively, this is teaming up to be a very interesting matchup if these 2 teams actually play, because I think yours is more defense and rebounding oriented, and mine is probably a little bit more scoring oriented. My last pick, I've got $3 left to spend. So is there a $3 player I want, or do I think there's someone at a lower price who is an even better fit? I think I am going to spend all 3, and it's really between 2 players. It's Carl Landry or AJ Hammonds. And both played here at really interesting junctures. Carl Landry, as you said before, like getting things started with Matt Painter and kind of getting that group its first taste of getting in the tournament and that sort of thing. And then you had AJ Hammonds, who kind of overlapped the end of one era and the start of a next. Was also a really important player on those 2 teams that dipped the most in the middle of that of Matt Painter's tenure. A great rim protector, also a very good rebounder. I think I'm going to take Carl Landry here, though. Part of it is I just want to have a representation from like throughout the tenure of Matt Painter, and I felt like maybe I was trending a little bit too recent. So I want to get an older soul on this group. But Carl Landry also was just a really great player. Like, I mean, 2 years in his career, I was just looking at his stats to make sure I was making a good decision. Two of his 3 years, he averaged 18 points, more than 18 points, more than 7 rebounds, and was not going to help you a lot from the perimeter necessarily. But again, by measure of then going on and being an established NBA player for a while after this, I think the bona fides are there that he is not one of the best couple of big men during Matt Painter's tenure, but he also, I think, exemplified where Matt Painter was going to go with that and the kind of players he was going to build around.
Yeah, and two of the most important players, I think, during Matt Painter's tenure, and I've not asked him if he feels the same way, but in my opinion, are Carl Landry and David Teague, who got that, second team that Matt Painter coached at Purdue into the NCAA tournament, which then kind of led into getting the baby Boilers with Hummel and Johnson and Moore, and Scott Martin was in that group as well before transferring. And then you got the ball rolling a little bit. Now there was, like you mentioned, there was a little lull after that, but now this thing is almost on autopilot. I don't want to say autopilot because the coaches are still working very hard to bring in recruits and doing a lot of work to have the success they're having. But when you get to a place where Purdue is right now, it's a little bit easier to get your foot indoors, or when you make a phone call to a guy to have him return your call, whatever it might be.
Yeah, the program's not on autopilot, but there's also no longer any dispute about where this program is, like what tier of program this is. And, you get to the national championship game, you win the Big Ten this many times, you go to the tournament this many times, you do enough of those things, but really the breakthrough getting to the national championship game, having a player like Zach Edey, like those things, and now having one like Braden Smith, like those things, there's just so much evidence now. It's not a theory anymore. It's not well, if this happens, then we can call Purdue one of the best 10 programs in the country. I think they've just done it. So these guys who were playing here 20 years ago, 18, 15 years ago, maybe they couldn't say that at the time, but they played a role in where this is built to and where this is now. Yeah. So your last pick, you have one.
I have $1 and I need a point guard.
One thin dime. I think I know who you're going to take.
And a little side story here, because Lewis Jackson is a $2 player. There's a photo that resurfaces every year, every March during the NCAA tournament of Purdue playing with the long shorts, and you see Chris Kramer at the free throw line and his shorts are down to his ankles, and then you see Robbie Hummel and he's got the long shorts down past his knees. And I asked Hummel in a media room a couple of years ago during the NCAA tournament about that photo, and he said the guy that it made no sense with was Lewis Jackson, who was like 5'7", and you couldn't even see his shoes. And he's bringing the ball up the court and dribbling between his legs and slashing. And I talked to Lou Jack at one point, and I meant to ask him about that, but I'm like, that baffles me, that how he even got in those shorts and kept them. Must have had him tied extra tight or something. But because I have $1 and I don't have a point guard, the choice that I have to make, which is not a bad choice at all, is PJ Thompson, who had a tremendous assist to turnover ratio, was a very good leader, very savvy basketball mind. He's, going to be a head coach at the college level at some point, I would assume. And he was very instrumental in a team that dang near made it to a Final Four. So I think he's a great guy if you can't have Braden Smith to be the point guard for your team.
Yeah, no, I think it's the obvious pick, but also a good value. Was the point guard for those teams, played an important role in that way. Was not a high volume 3-point shooter, but is one of the best 3-point shooters by percentage in Purdue history. A really strong free throw shooter, and was smart enough to be able to get to the basket. Like, there's a lot of ways that he would help, especially the kind of team that you ended up putting together. So let's look at those teams again. Sam's team: Zach Edey, Juwan Johnson, Raphael Davis, Vincent Edwards, and PJ Thompson. My team: Braden Smith, Jaden Ivey, Ryan Klein, Treven Williams, and Carl Landry. I think, if people who are watching, leave in the comments who you think put together the better team, or where you think you would have made a very different decision. I think whichever team has Zach Edey, no offense to any of the guys I picked, whichever team has Zach Edey is the better team. So this was a tough. He almost needed to be like a $6 player and really skew the whole thing, just because he changed the game so much. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this was because the team that I ended up with is a little bit more like the team that Purdue is going to be this year. Like, you don't have the Zach Edey type presence underneath. Even the big guys they have do things very well, but don't do them in a Zach Edey kind of way, like a force of nature kind of way. It's a little bit more built around, you got an elite point guard, you have strong shooters and twos and threes next to him, and then you're going to have a 4-5, and I could have taken Trakoff and Wren. You're going to have a 4-5 combination where the 4 has to be able to do a lot of things for you, and the 5 is going to be interchangeable with a couple of guys and give you the rim protection and rebounding you're looking for, along with some scoring. So that's, I think that just struck me as soon as I saw that exercise, the 15-point exercise. I thought, oh, like, you're kind of asking people to either build this next Purdue team or to build the one that just happened.
Yeah, and I think in having Ryan Cline, you have a great equalizer to, you talk about my rebounding. If that's a guy that if he gets hot, it doesn't matter who's rebounding, because it's just going in. And I think Fletcher Lawyer is very much in the same realm. He's not able to create as well as Cline could, but he's a guy that can get hot, and he's a guy we didn't pick. And man, I think he's somebody that over the course of time, 10 years down the road, we're going to talk about Fletcher Lawyer and say, man, he's a guy that was undervalued. He did a lot of great things, and people knock him for, not being a great athlete or not being a great on-ball defender, but he's very good at what he does. And he's another guy that's just basketball savvy. And because of that can make up for some, perceived weaknesses that he may have.
And like, I don't think Omer Mayer is a Jaden Ivey kind of player, but what if he gives you an impact that's like Jaden Ivey? You know what I mean? Like, what if you get some combination of the 2 guard is that productive for this team this year? It's interesting to think about. We're going to be spending, I think, a lot of the next, what is this, August, the next 9 months or whatever it is, 7 months, probably trying to like not be too over the top with how we describe this team and the expectations. I think to be sort of like in a measured way, really optimistic about what this team can accomplish, for lack of a better term. And I think you see why, because you can do an exercise like this and see similarities, like direct similarities to what you would get if you were trying to build a team from the best players throughout Matt Painter's career.
Yeah, and something interesting that I didn't touch on earlier, I talked to Jakari Harris after that practice last week, and just asked him what's having all these different options, because there's going to be nights where guys don't play well, and you've got the luxury of, do we go with Jacobson or Clough, or does Purdue go with Omer Mayer for an extended period of time, or is he a guy because you have different things, you maybe don't play him as much some nights? And he just kind of smiled, and I said, like, what is the ceiling for this team? And I think he can know what he's going to say, but he said, we can win a national championship. And 2 years ago, people sometimes are hesitant to overshoot expectations or to put that on themselves. And that team 2 years ago, all season long, guys were saying, we want to win a national championship. And I was kind of like, let's pump the brakes. This team just lost to a 16 seed the year before. But sure enough, all year long, that's what those guys talked about. Even after a loss at Northwestern, I remember Fletcher Lawyer saying, we looked at each other in that locker room at Northwestern and said, hey, guys, it's fine. We can win a national championship. Losing at Northwestern in the middle of the winter does not take away from that. And sure enough, that team was one win away from doing just that. So these guys have put a huge expectation on themselves, but I think that it is the right mix of guys who can kind of handle the pressure that will come from, if everything goes as it could, come with, the expectations being placed from outside.
Yeah, it's the nature of the variance of the NCAA tournament means that sometimes how good you are isn't what determines how far you go in the tournament. Like it can be a bit of a cruel exercise, but I think that team getting to Zach Edey taking that team to the national championship game 2 years ago but every team that comes after it, or at least now for several years, it takes the pressure off of them. You can have really high expectations without feeling like you have to carry something for like the entirety of a program for the last 40 years, right? Like it's all about what that team can do, but it's also you've experienced it. Guys on this team were in that game. Like they know what that is, and it's not I think before there was a little bit of a like dare to dream. Like, do you dare say that this team could go contend for a national championship because of all the ways in recent Purdue history where that keeps slipping through their fingers well before you even get to the Final Four? Like now, I think that it changed the mindset a little bit, at least from what I've experienced since coming back. I noticed a different tone shift, and it's not the same players, so that may have happened anyway, but just that experience, getting to where they went and getting to live in that moment, I think now pays forward for probably years to come by just making it a tangible thing instead of a theoretical thing.
Yeah. And if Purdue can get to a Final Four in Indianapolis, I mean, I saw how full that building was in Phoenix. And that's not a short drive for a lot of the people probably who were out there, or flight, I guess, because it is most of the way across the country. I can only imagine that it would be almost full of Purdue fans if the Boilermakers are in the Final Four in Indianapolis. So that would be a tremendous home court advantage, I would think. And so as you said, you got three guys who started on a team in the national championship game 2 years ago. So they're not going to be fazed by any kind of environment either.
Exactly. That is a pretty deep look at some summer basketball stuff, a deep, long summer. I don't know if it was deep. It was long. A long summer basketball conversation. And we'll be back next week, probably talking a little bit more about what we talked about at the front of this, which is, do we have some certainty about the quarterback situation, and kind of wrapping up, maybe even getting into, we've got to at some point start getting into kind of some predictive stuff of like what we think this season could be for Purdue, and more importantly, like where things are headed long term, just from what we've seen so far. So for Sam King, I'm Nathan Baird. Thanks for joining us.